Tweed Ski Lodge Caravan Park resident John Rawlings is still reeling from the devastation of this week's flood on the Tweed River just south of the Queensland border. Key points. Caravan Park resident John Rawlings says he's overwhelmed by the volunteer support. Caravan Park resident John Rawlings says he's overwhelmed by the volunteer support. Homes on the riverbank site had torrents of water sweeping through them. Homes on the riverbank site had torrents of water sweeping through them. Stephen Kudzius helped rescue resident and has spent all week helping to clean up. He has lived in the Caravan Park for more than a decade, but has never seen anything like this flood. It's an absolute disaster area. It's been biblical, epic, he said. Water came up to my window, I copped it bad, lost most of my material things in my life. Volunteers have spent much of today cleaning out his home and belongings in an effort to save what they could. Tweed Ski Lodge Caravan Park is a mud pit after this week's flood. Mr. Rawlings' home is right on the forefront of the Tweed River at Chinderah. I was going around with a kayak with my main possessions, paddling. I'm fighting back tears in the evening when I lay in bed. Mr. Rawlings said he was overwhelmed by the help he had received from volunteers. About 20 people were living at the caravan park. Mud from the flood has rendered this caravan on the site uninhabitable. But many of the vans and cottages here have been rendered uninhabitable. Resident Matt Coleman said he woke up at 3 a.m. to warn the residents in the park that water was rising rapidly. He said despite that, every site had a torrent of water sweep through, leaving homes covered in feet of mud and residents losing most of their belongings. Volunteer Stephen Kudzius is one of dozens who've spent the entire week helping to evacuate residents and assist them in the flood aftermath. Tweed Ski Lodge Caravan Park is on the bank of the Tweed River. We didn't realize how bad it was until we started getting calls from friends and family that needed help getting out of their houses, he said. So we launched a boat, because we realized there wasn't many emergency services on the water at the time to render assistance. We realized the carnage that was taking place and pulled as many people out of the water as we could. He said people could have been hurt or worse, had volunteers not been there. A lot of the people in these caravan parks are quite elderly. It was difficult to get them in boats, because they were up to their waist or higher in water, he said. Stephen Kudzius says they kept rescuing people because there were no emergency services at the scene. They were cold, scared and going into shock. We had to get them to where they could be ferried by ambulance to the hospital. No emergency services. Mr. Kudzius said volunteer rescue teams were out searching for people into the night. We were out until after dark. The river was a raging torrent with logs and gas bottles, you name it. We came out the next day and there still wasn't any help or emergency services on the water, so we kicked into gear again and started saving people where we could. Then when the water started receding, it turned to the delivery of food and essential supplies, cleanup. The mud is probably the worst part. It's fairly toxic. There's sewage and pesticides and every other awful thing. And these people are having to clean up amongst it. It's pretty awful. People doing heroic, incredible things. A makeshift distribution centre to help floods victims at Caravan on the Gold Coast has had hundreds of people pouring in with donations and supplies each day. Manager Sam Cardone said the situation across the border in northern New South Wales had become so dire that volunteers had gone from simply providing food and supplies to organising helicopters and hiking to stranded people. Sam Cardone says volunteers are using helicopters to get food and water to people cut off. People are doing the most heroic, incredible things right now. It is incredible to see, she said. We have convoys meeting helicopters to drop to locations that currently can't be accessed by road or boat. There are areas that are completely cut off in northern NSW that you can't get to. It's very dangerous to get by boat, or you just literally cannot get to. We're driving convoys to get as close as we can. The helicopters are landing, filling up then flying out to those affected areas. We've got people meeting convoys and then hiking into those places that aren't accessible, loading guys up with massive pallets of water, food, and they are hiking 7-8 kilometers into locations that can't be accessed right now.